Hello loves and welcome to today's video. March was a spectacular reading month for me on like all possible metrics. I finished 29 books, which is 10 more than I finished last March. I only read 19 in March last year. My average rating was a 3.7, which is higher than I usually do. Normally I'm at like a 3.3, 3.4. And I had 4 5-star books, and none of those 5 stars were graphic novels. Those are all actual novel length books that I rated 5 stars this month. So I'm so excited to start going over them with you. As usual, we will start with the book that I gave the lowest rating to and make our way to those 5 stars. The lowest rating I gave out in March was a 2.25, and that was to Their Monstrous Hearts by Yeet Turhan. This is an April release. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy from NetGalley, and I feel bad that I didn't end up liking it. This is a horror book about our main character, Ricardo, whose grandmother has died and left him her estate and her butterfly collection. When he gets to her manor, the servants are acting kind of sketchy, and he finds this manuscript that is a memoir of his grandmother's life, and he reads it and finds out the dark secret that's in this thing. For me, the weighting of this was a little off balance in terms of how much was in the present day and how much was this memoir, because you do get excerpts from the memoir. It was so much of the memoir that what was going on in the current day didn't have sufficient suspense for me. The first half of this book was also so dull because you don't even get introduced to what the Monstrous in Monstrous Hearts is until like 60% of the way through. The pacing of this one was so off for me, and the plot twist at the end just wasn't intriguing enough that I would say it was worth it. Next rating group is the 2.75s. The first one is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, but from Edward's perspective, and Edward is a yapper, so this book is so much longer than the original, but still has the same lack of nothing happening unless you are really invested in Edward Cullen's internal monologue, which if I was 14 again, maybe, but as a 30-year-old, I do not care what's going on in his head. So a 2.75 for that one. I also gave a 2.75 to Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This is the first in the Magnolia Parks series. It is a contemporary romance series that I've seen described as like Gossip Girl, but for adults. And I don't know why I thought I would like this, because I didn't like Gossip Girl when I was a teenager, and toxic relationships between rich people is just not something I'm particularly interested in. I was so annoyed with both of our main characters throughout this entire book, and it's a long book. It's like over 500 pages. Luckily I did audio so I could get through it a bit faster, and the puzzle I was doing while listening kept me entertained, but whew, this was a rough one for me, and I will not be continuing this series. And the third 2.75 is another random archery nonfiction book, Archery by Rick Sapp. So this book was very long in a literal sense, that it was a tall book for some reason, but it was also only like 100 and something pages. 35-ish to 40 of that was the history of archery as a sport and as a use for hunting. That part was interesting. And then the next 100 pages are just pictures of bows that were purchasable at the time that this book was published, but also only hunting bows. Like, it was entirely compound bows with a couple recurve, but like hunting recurves. As someone who does archery as a sport and not for hunting, I was so disappointed in the lack of Olympic recurves. Hoyt wasn't mentioned at all. Win and Win wasn't mentioned at all, which are the biggest brand in like Olympic archery, or barebow, which is what I do. It was a picture book. It feels kind of cheap to count those pages, but I did look at all the pictures. I would have wanted that first section on its own would have been great. The rest of it felt like it was padding out the runtime of the book, so 2.75. For 3-star books, we have 2, both of them are manga. The first one is volume 3 of The Way of the House Husband. This is a manga series about a Yakuza member who has retired to become a house husband, and how he just goes around doing his daily errands while everybody around him's like, oh my god, that guy's so scary. He's gonna kill everybody in here with a pencil, and he's just taking cooking classes. I gave this a 3 because I do like the concept. It's just getting a little repetitive at this point. It doesn't really have a like common through narrative that I think it would benefit from in making it more of an interesting hook. So I'm probably going to give it 1 or 2 more just to see if they do pick up something like that. And then if not, I'll probably enjoy and end my run of the series. Next is Killing Stalking Volume 7 by Kugi. This is a manhwa series, I think, because it's Korean. This is about a stalker who breaks into the house of who he's stalking, and turns out that that's a serial killer, and they have a very toxic relationship going on. I only gave Volume 7 a 3 because I was losing a bit of interest. It again, getting a bit repetitive in killing people to keep their secret. And I felt this one didn't really develop much of the story outside of one event happening towards the very end, which then led into number 8. So that one only got a 3. Now we have 3.25. The first one is Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. This is about like a bunch of people at a university who find a grave site and are like investigating it. I'm gonna be honest, I fell asleep listening to this, woke up and continued it and was like, I don't think I want to go back and listen to the rest of this. So should I probably have counted this as a DNF because I slept through the middle part of it? Probably. But 3.25, like the writing wasn't bad, it was just boring. I also gave a 3.25 to Can't Spell Treason Without T. I always try and flip the treason and the T. That is by Rebecca Thorne. It's the first in the Tomes and Tea series. This is about a woman who's a guard for the queen ruler of this area. And one day she gets fed up and she flees in the middle of the night with her girlfriend to start a tea shop / bookstore. And I get how other people might like this. I did like Legends and Lattes. I just find with cozy fantasy, there's like a ratio of cozy to action that I needs to have to keep me interested. And this one felt a little off in both respects. When we were having those cozy scenes, they didn't feel quite as cozy as what I was getting from Legends and Lattes. But then also, the action wasn't actiony enough to make up for that imbalance. So it failed on both the cozy and the fantasy for me, but it wasn't terrible, and I see how other people might like this. It just was not the right cozy fantasy for me when I compare all of my cozy fantasy to Legends and Lattes, which I really loved. And the third 3.25 is Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison. This is about a woman who has returned to her small town because her sister is pregnant and the father of the baby has left, and she goes to the small town to like help her sister out. And then one night she gets bit by something in the woods, and oh, it was a werewolf. So she starts turning into a werewolf and also finding her own self-identity through her exploration of being a werewolf. This got a 3.25 for me. I did enjoy it. It's just not something I would necessarily reread or recommend widely. In terms of being a werewolf story, it was a bit on the mundane side, and the focus was more on the woman's relationship with her family and her mother and her sister and her friends and the guy in town that had a crush on her in high school than it was about the fact that she's turning into a freaking werewolf. It's to the point where like a couple chapters would go by and I'd forget she was supposed to be a werewolf, and then she'd just like drop it of like, oh well, the full moon's coming, I gotta get a cage. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a werewolf book. For me, I would have preferred more werewolf in this werewolf book, but I did think that the characters were well written, and the part of it that was about her reconciling her relationships was interesting. I was sold a werewolf book. Moving on to the 3.5s, we have Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. This is a YA novel about an island town where there's the new girl, the popular girl, and the like regular town girl. One day someone goes missing and they are uncovering the deep, dark secret of this island. I liked the parts of this book that was about uncovering the deep dark secret of the island, but I could not keep the three girls straight in my head. It took me so long to be like, oh right, we're with the rich one right now. I did not care about the relationship drama because I don't tend to care about the relationship drama of teenagers at this point in my life, so it only got a 3.5. If you are interested in YA romance, if you are a young adult yourself, you might enjoy this a lot more than I did. For me, I was not that interested in the relationships, so only got a 3.5 for me. But it did have a good mystery, horror-y elements. I did enjoy that aspect of it. I also read Mine by Delilah S. Dawson. This is about a 12-year-old whose parents have been having financial troubles, so they move into this new home, and they got this home super cheap because it was a former hoarder house. So she's having to help her mom clean out this hoarder house, and also maybe there's a ghost haunting her who just keeps yelling at her to leave. Everything in this house is hers, mine, you know. I surprisingly enjoyed this for being a middle grade. It obviously is not going to be on the same level as some of the books that are going to get a 5-star later, but it was an enjoyable little mystery, and I did enjoy kind of the tamer horror aspects because obviously it's middle grade, so we're not going to get gore and blood, but I still was intrigued by the horror regardless. So pretty good middle grade, just it's a middle grade, so it's a 3.5. Next we have a nonfiction. This is The Art of Intrusion by Kevin D. Mitnick, William S. Simon. Subtitle, The Real Stories Behind the Exploits of Hackers, Intruders, and Deceivers. So Kevin D. Mitnick is someone who was convicted for hacking. I don't know his actual backstory. I was in a cyberpunk era when I added this to my TBR. So this is stories of real life hackers, and it goes through basically how the hackers exploited like casinos or corporations or various other things. Also what one can do to protect themselves from these types of exploits. Those sections of it felt so targeted at people who work in IT that it wasn't necessarily as helpful as it could have been to the layman. The language used was like a little more advanced on the tech side than I could keep track of. I would consider myself to be like moderately tech savvy in a individual user way. The talk of like exploits in different router DNS and all that stuff went a little bit over my head as someone who doesn't have a computer science degree, but some of the stories were interesting. Some of the advice was still useful, so got a 3.5. And here we have Killing and Stalking Volume 8. So after 7 got a 3, 8 got a 3.5. That cliffhanger that we left on in 7 picked up in 8, and that was an interesting plot line for us to follow. Being 8 volumes in, I don't want to talk too much about plot to spoil anything, but we are seeming to reach a climax and an ending of this series, and I think I'm ready for that. I struggled with Blood on Her Tracks going on way longer than the plot line seemed to be able to carry, so I'm happy that this one's wrapping up because I think we've kind of run out of places to go. Next 2.5, we have The Tunnel by Stephanie Ann. This is a brand new release. It came out like 3 days ago when I'm filming this. This is about a group of teenagers who go into this abandoned subway station. One of them stays near the door to watch. 3 people go left, 2 people go right, and the guy on watch falls asleep, wakes up the next morning, and his friends haven't come back. So we follow the group of 2, the group of 3, and the guy that left behind, Chris, as they figure out what's going on in this tunnel that's a little bit weird, and time and space mean nothing. This one really ramped up towards the end in terms of the horror and the gore, and I was loving that, but for the first 2/3, I would say, it focuses on each of the teenagers and their insecurities in life. While some of the insecurities were still relatable to an adult, I would have wanted a bit more of the gore to be paced throughout of it, so it felt a bit more balanced and not just like, here's this person's life story. But I did overall enjoy it, so I got a 3.5. I did talk with the author about this, and this is going to be the first in a series, so I am looking forward to seeing what could be developed on top of the lore that this book established. Next book is The Unworthy by Augustina Basterrica. This is about some nuns in a Abby, who have this very strange regime of rules that they have to follow. I'm going to be honest, I didn't quite follow this one. I enjoyed what I caught, but I felt very lost for most of it. I think a lot of the ponderings of the nun I didn't enjoy, but what I understood of like the foreshadowing of what was going on in this world, I did enjoy. And I would have wanted more of that to be developed and less the ponderings of this nun. Because I didn't follow a lot of it. And I feel that was a me problem. I maybe wasn't giving it quite as much undivided attention as it should have gotten. A lot of people love Augustina Basterica a lot more than I do, so she might just not be the author for me. Moving on to 3.75, we have The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. This is a science fiction novel about a future where humans have based their technology on this, like, don't remember if it was called the pump, some kind of piece of technology that like dumps some kind of element into a different universe, and then we can draw something else from that universe. So the first part of the book is this guy realizing that maybe this technology was not developed in a straightforward way where humans actually fully understand what's going on, and that maybe the sun could explode if it's used improperly. Then in part 2, you get the perspective of like the other universe where they're also having the same realization of like, shit, we're getting stuff from this other universe, and maybe that's not a good thing. I thought it was a really interesting, like, parallel world situation where you got 2 point of views on the same situation. I thought the science elements of it were really interesting, and some of the commentary of growing heavily reliant on technology that not everybody fully understands could be relatable when people are pushing the use of AI without actually understanding what AI is. Asimov, it's usually a bit hit or miss for me, but this one I definitely enjoyed a lot, though I do find his writing a bit dry at times. Next, 3.75 is Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This is about a man who's living in Chinatown and wants to be like a kung fu star. And then a crime happens in Chinatown that he's called in to help investigate as someone who is familiar with the area. The structure of the book is kind of like a script, and it is definitely meant to be a critique and criticism of the way the film industry treats Asian people. Asian people do not necessarily get a lot of the starring roles in the cinema industry and have typically been typecast into very narrow range of roles. I thought that was a really interesting format for this book. I did enjoy what I could follow of the plot, but I did find that the format sometimes obfuscated the plot. Also at 3.75 is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, or if you want to use her preferred title for it, Wet. This is a BDSM romance between an Olympic diver and an Olympic swimmer, and the trial and tribulations of them trying to excel at their sport while also figuring out their relationship. It's Ali Hazelwood, so there's also STEM stuff going on in the background. I was not expecting to like this one, even at a 3.75, and was surprised it got that high. I did enjoy this. I just don't think sports romances are going to be my preferred type of romance, even though they do seem to be very popular right now. At least compared to Icebreaker, Ali Hazelwood seemed to have a bit more of a grasp of how sports work, based on my limited experience of how sports work, and some of the romance scenes were well written and spicy and steamy and all of that stuff. I just did find the conflict in this one to be a little contrived. And the next 3.75 is For the Last Session by Julia Barth. This is about a woman who is like a social worker, and some anonymous woman comes into her hospital one day, and it turns out that she's actually an actress in the social worker's favorite childhood movie. And then the patient gets picked up by people who aren't her parents, and the social worker tries to track her down and is led to this like wellness retreat. So she goes undercover in this wellness retreat to try and save the actress who she thinks has been basically kidnapped. The first half of this book deals a lot with the social worker's repressed trauma around her own childhood, so some very serious trigger warnings to people who might have some childhood trauma. And the second half of the book really dives into like what this wellness retreat running people believe in. It's a cult, let's be honest, it's a cult. And God, their beliefs were so wild that it was hard for me to suspend my disbelief. Like, I know sometimes cults believe in weird things, but this one was like extra weird to me. I gave it 3.75 because I did enjoy kind of that first half. The second half lost me a little bit with like what the cult believes, but then it did pick up towards the very end with like the action of, you know, escaping a cult. So overall a 3.75. I would still recommend picking this up, but just be careful about those trigger warnings. And the last 3.75 is Friends of the Museum by Heather McGowan. This is a 24-hour period in this museum. We follow a variety of different employees of this museum as they are trying to throw their annual gala. And we go through the professional and the personal problems of basically this whole cast of characters. And it is like a minute by minute playthrough. I thought the writing style of this one was really fun and unique. You get this sense of flow and sense of space because you'll have someone in their office listening to music and you'll switch POVs and it's the security guard in the hallway walking past like, ugh, she's playing this song again. It really helped this book to flow and feel like realistic day. But this was also a lot focused on like a character study and not so much on plot. While I did enjoy some of the character studies, other of them I just couldn't relate to as much. And what little plot we did get, I did enjoy. It had a little bit of an eat the rich narrative, which I always love, but overall a 3.75. There will be people that this book is an absolute hit for. I just prefer more plot-driven stories than character-driven stories. 4 stars to No Longer Human by Junji Ito, which is an important distinction because this is a graphic novelization basically of a book by Osamu Dazai, which is allegedly like semi-autobiographical about this man who feels like he has to mask and make everybody like him all the time, and then also just has a lot of very unfortunate things happen because of his strive to make people like him. I'm really interested to read the novel now to see how it compares. When I started this, I didn't realize that that's what this book was, but I did really enjoy it, and I do think that Junji Ito's art is so beautiful. I was interested by the story. There are some really tragic things that happen throughout this book that really was very interesting to read. I am interested to see how much of it was actually autobiographical because that's fascinating to me. Overall, I would recommend this. If you've read the original novel, let me know if it's good and I should check that out because I feel like I want to read it at some point, but at this point reading it like back to back, probably not going to get the same impact. Another 4-star and a 4-star nonfiction at that, Atlas of the Heart, Mapping Meaningful Connection and the Language of Human Experience by Brene Brown. This is a nonfiction book that essentially goes through different emotions and digs into how they're actually felt and what they actually mean and a little bit of how to cope with them. This got a 4 because I wish it had delved a bit more into how to healthily deal with the certain negative emotions that were mentioned throughout this book, but I did find it really interesting. It did seem well supported with studies mentioned throughout, and I'm sure one could dig into those studies even more if they wanted more information. Considering I'm not like a self-help girly, I was a little worried going into this. I overall enjoy it. I don't feel like anything I learned was groundbreaking. It's gonna change my life, but I did find it interesting at the time, so 4 stars. And also 4 stars to volume 10 of Spy Family. We're quite far into the series at this point. If you don't know what it's about, it's this family where the dad is a spy, the mom is an assassin, and the daughter is a telepath, but no one knows about each other except the telepath, who does know that the parents are each of what they are. Essentially, they're in this family because the spy needs the daughter to befriend a certain person to like stop an espionage plot. A different outfit because I did not remember what this one was about when I was doing my wrap up, and then I saw the cover of the book. I'm like, oh yeah, it was about the backstory of the dad, Lloyd Forger, who is like Twilight, the spy guy. So it's his backstory of like how he got into spying. I did remember that, and I liked that we learned more about him, and that's why I got a 4, but I did immediately forget that as soon as I didn't have that book in front of me anymore. I did enjoy this one. This one felt like it had a bit more going on, and Anya's adorable. The dog, amazing and so smart. He's such a good boy. And then the parents are always into interesting shenanigans too. 4.5 stars, we have The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This is about a university woman whose mother has started dating a white man, and she just becomes absolutely tantalized by his eyes, but not in a love way, but in a like, I want to eat them way. So it's her trying to fight the urge to scoop out and eat his eyes. So this really explores cultural connection and family through this kind of gruesome story of this woman wanting to eat eyeballs, specifically blue eyes. I thought this was an interesting exploration of one's need to assimilate to white culture while also wanting to maintain a connection to your existing familial culture. And that was on top of being kind of a sick horror about wanting to eat eyeballs. This book didn't need to do anything more than that, and I probably would have liked it. Such an interesting concept and so interesting to read. 4.75, we have Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This is a YA, but a horror YA, so it was a little gory at times. I was surprised. This is about two boys at a boarding school. One writes stories and the other draws the creatures from the stories. And then the monsters start becoming real and they have to try and protect their school from the monsters coming out of the forest, and at the same time figuring out their attraction for each other. This is a 4.75. This was so close to a 5. The writing of this one was beautiful. Absolutely stunningly, gorgeously written. The only reason this got a 4.75 is I think that one of the plot twists would have been a bit more impactful if we'd gotten a bit more character development. And that's about all I will say without going into spoilers, because I think going into this blind for that twist is going to improve the experience. I would highly recommend this just because of how beautiful the writing is. And without further ado, the books I gave a 5-star to this month, which we have 4 to go over. First is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Mohtar. This I would highly recommend listening to the audiobook for, because it is about two sisters who sing to the forest to help it grow, and then one of the sisters falls in love with like a fae creature on the other side of the dimensional forest type wall thing. And throughout this book there is actual songs being sung, and the audiobook did have music played by Amal El-Mohtar and her sister. So I highly recommend the audiobook. This was just so beautiful of an experience to listen to. The writing was beautiful. I loved the characters. The plot had this real fairy tale feeling to it. I loved this. I highly recommend it. Second 5-star for the month was Guillotine by Delilah S. Dawson. This is about a woman who starts dating the son of a fashion mogul because she wants to basically get into a job at this fashion mogul's house. Fashion house? That's what they're called, right? She gets invited to go to this rich kid's island for the weekend, and then the servants start a revolt while she's there. Oh my gosh, I was hooked. I listened to this audiobook in a single sitting because I love an eat the rich narrative, and I was hooked on this book. Delilah S. Dawson's writing for this one particularly is so good. I think she does a much better job at writing for an adult audience than a middle grade, but oh, this was so good. Also, something that had me hooked was Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. This will hit a little close to home for some people because this is about a man whose entire family gets brainwashed by Fax News. Split into 3 parts. So the first part is him finding out his parents have been taken, and wild what his parents do when he shows up. The second part goes through his brother's family, the different ways that the father, mother, teen son, and little baby son can be impacted by what's the far right pipeline, honestly. And I thought it was such a good examination of the different ways that one can fall into that far-right mindset because you had like, you know, Fax News. You had the wellness industry. You had like incel culture. It was just so interesting, but it was also gory at times, which was interesting for me as someone who likes horror. And then the third part goes back to like our original character and him trying to like flee and find a safe haven for him and his nephew. Oh, it was so poignant to everything that's going on right now. I love a social horror, and it was just so interesting being able to draw parallels between that story and what we see in the news or online. Reading this and watching Adolescence in the same month, very topical, very interesting, and I highly recommend it if you like a social horror. And the final 5-star of the month, I finally read Babel. Why has this been on my shelf for a year and a half and I only just now read it? Because, oh my god, this was so good. R.F. Kuang is so good at writing. I honestly had some hesitation and worries about going into this because there's honestly been quite a few critiques about this book recently of like, it reads like a textbook, and I'm like, yeah, I loved that. Or that's too heavy-handed, and I'm like, some people need that. There's a character in this book that is literally an example of why people need to be heavy-handed about shit. Did you read it? So this is about our main character who adopts the name Robin Swift, who was born in China. His mother dies of cholera, and he is saved by this white professor who takes him off to Oxford because he has been drafted to the Oxford University Translation Department, where they use etymology to do magic through silverworking. And the book follows the struggle that Robin has using his cultural history and language to further the British Empire. Every time I started to be like, okay, maybe I see this as getting a little slow, something would happen and I'd be like, okay, I'm hooked again. I was so in love with this. Like, the textbook feeling of it, it worked for me because I love etymology. So all of the times that it would be like, hey, by the way, in the footnotes, I am going to explain why this magic works in that this root word and this root word have the similar way back in the Proto-Germanic language. And I was like, I stop and do that all the time when I'm reading books of like, I've never heard that phrase before. Where does that come from? And then I Google it. I didn't have to Google it. It was in the book, in the footnotes for me. R.F. Kuang saved me from having to Google so many things. Honestly, maybe it was a good thing that it took me a year and a half to get around to this, because some of the discussions around using a drug crisis as a cover for imperialist motivations and the taking of another country's natural resources felt a little extra poignant recently. Fucking loved this book. Highly recommend if you are a nerd like me. So, those are all of the books that I read in March. Let me know in the comments down below what the best book you read in March was, or leave a tower emoji. I feel like they have one. They gotta have one, right? If you enjoyed this video, like and consider subscribing so you don't miss what I'm reading next month. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.